Hi, I'm Angela. I live in Temple Hills, Maryland. I've been diagnosed with uterine leiomyosarcoma, and I am like a DIYer. I love doing it yourself around the home. I also love painting, and I especially love doing arts and crafts with my grandchildren. In the beginning of 2017, I started having irregular menstrual cycles. My menstrual cycle was coming like every 2.5 weeks, and the bleeding was heavier than usual. And I had a lot of like cramping and discomfort, which I don't typically have cramps with my menstrual cycle. So I went to my OBGYN about it, and she said, well, you have a fibroid. And she said the first step is to try hormone treatment. So she prescribed me some, I think it was like birth control, something to assist with the hormones. So I did take the hormones for a while. I didn't see a change in the bleeding and the symptoms that I was having. So I went back. I was really trying to talk my doctor into giving me a partial hysterectomy, but she wouldn't do it. But she did say she would give me a uteral ablation. So in July of 2017, I got an ablation, and that stopped my periods completely. But that same year is the year I turned 40 years old. And on my birthday in November, I started having pain in my left hip. And with me getting older and turning 40, I didn't think much of it. I just said, I'm getting older, I have a pain. And then, as time went, I would still have the pain off and on, but it wasn't severe. It didn't really interfere with my quality of life. So I just continued on. So I'll just fast forward to 2020. In March of 2020, um, I was, well, no, in 2018, at the end of 2018, I gained 30 pounds in like 1 month. And I was just like, that just does not sound right. Went back to the doctor. They did like an A1C test to see if I was diabetic. Didn't come back as diabetic. They did the normal blood test, didn't see anything as an issue. So I said, well, maybe I just gained weight because I do love to eat. So I just brushed that aside. But I also had other issues, like I was having, my heart was fluttering. I was having that left hip pain off and on. And, no matter what I did, no matter how I changed my diet, no matter how I exercised, I could not lose weight. So this led into the beginning of 2020. At this time is when COVID hit. So I was still having the heart fluttering, which was causing me to cough, and it kind of got worse in March of 2020. So that caused me to go to urgent care, and I got a negative COVID test, and but I did end up having further issues after that. I started having diarrhea like 7, 8 times a day for months. And I went back and forth to the doctor. They were doing stool samples. They didn't see anything. And finally, I said, look, please refer me to a gastroenterologist. And they did. And the gastroenterologist did a colonoscopy and said I had lymphocytic colitis. So the gastroenterologist put me on immunosuppressants for the lymphocytic colitis. But at this time is also when the pain on my left side and hip got worse. And it was like I was having intermittent episodes of pain, like I say every couple of months. And the pain was bad. Like the only relief I could have was laying down, but I thought maybe it was because of the lymphocytic colitis. So I just continued going to the gastroenterologist. During this time, too, I was back and forth to the ER and urgent care a lot because of the episodes of pain. The episodes of pain had gotten so close together and so intense. And I was working full time and I was like working through the pain. And I had a work trip coming up. I was supposed to go to Utah for like a conference. And I was in so much pain. I was taking 4 extra strength Tylenol and 4 200 milligram ibuprofens at the same time for the pain, like multiple times during the day, every 4 hours, just to make it through the pain. And I actually ended up doing like a 3 day fast because I thought it was a gastrointestinal issue. So I was like, I'm going to just clean out my insides and see if this helps. And I was also giving myself enemas, which I think was a big mistake because by the time that 3 days was done and I had done that, the pain was so severe. I was like, there's no way I can go on this trip for work. I'm afraid, to go in this much pain and something happens. So it was April 19th at 5 in the morning. I went to the emergency room and I almost left because of what I've experienced several times during this journey is when you go in without abdominal pain to the ER, they really have not taken me seriously. And the nurse told me at this visit, they were like, we get sick of people coming in with abdominal pain because they think it's like gas or constipation. And I almost walked out, but I'm so glad I didn't because they did a CT scan and they saw what they were referring to as abscesses. They thought it was abscesses in my abdomen. But then they followed up with an MRI with contrast and an ultrasound, and that's when they started seeing a solid mass, and then also abscesses around the solid mass. And even at that time with those scans, they were thinking it was not cancer. They just were saying um, endometriosis, possibly. So they actually checked me into the hospital because I was also tachycardic. And I think it was just because of the pain and everything my body was going through. And I had sepsis. So I really kind of am thankful for the diagnosis because I I kind of found out that I was on my deathbed when I went into the ER, and I found that out through the surgery that happened at that hospital. But they did try to discharge me, and I broke down crying because the pain still had not subsided. I was still in severe pain. They were giving me morphine and oxycodone, and nothing was taking away the pain. I was laying there with bags of ice on my back, on my side, just to get relief because nothing was helping. So they were constantly allowing me to refill and get tons of ice packs so I could have some relief. After I broke down crying with the OBGYN that came to see me at the ER, she went and got a surgeon to come talk to me and talk about what was going on. And the surgeon said, do you have any STDs? And I was just like, no, I don't have any STDs. And she was like, well, when was the last time you were sexually active? And it had been like over a year at that point, but I was kind of offended by that. Um, But then she was like, "Well, do you know what endometriosis is?" And I said, "Yeah, I've heard of it." So she was like, that's what they think it was. But because of, my desperation and me crying and I just did not want to leave that hospital without something happening. The surgeon agreed to do surgery. She said she would go in and give me a hysterectomy and, clean things up to give me some relief from the pain. So I got the surgery on the 23rd of April, so about 4 days after I went to the ER, and it was a Saturday. And they took me into surgery, and when I woke up, the surgeon, she was right there. She was like, "I'm so sorry." She was like, "You have cancer." She was like, "I think it's leiomyosarcoma." Of course, they had to send it for a pathology report, but she had looked at what she pulled out and she believed that's what it was. And she said that when she went in, my abdominal cavity was like filled with pus, like the tumor had become infected, and that's what had caused the sepsis. And I knew something was kind of funny a week before I went to the ER because I was having a hard time staying awake. Like I was just like drifting off while I was sitting there working or doing things. But so she said that the tumor was like 10 by 10 centimeters, and it had the wordage, I think she said, obliterated the left side anatomy, meaning it had pushed everything on the left side of my abdomen out of the way and had just kind of taken over that area. And that's what was causing the pain. It was like on my nerves, wrapped around my blood vessels and everything over there. And so that's what had been causing the pain. She removed my uterus. She removed as much of the cancer as she could. She cleaned out all the infectious fluid, the pus, and all that. And then she also called a surgical gastroenterologist because she said the cancer was going up into my intestines, and she couldn't really resect it from where it was entangled with my blood vessels and lymph nodes and all that. So she removed my uterus because that's where it originated and had come out of. She took a piece of one of my fallopian tubes for pathology, but she left my ovaries. She left everything else, and she left some of the cancer like in my abdominal wall and on my intestines because when she went in, apparently I had like some uncontrolled bleeding and they had to give me blood and they had to stop the bleeding. And I think she just did what she could under the circumstances and then closed me up. The surgeon that did my surgery, she said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I'm feeling okay." I said, "The only thing is I can hear like my heart beating in my ear." And she was like, "You shouldn't be hearing that." She was like, "Go to urgent care for your insurance. Go to urgent care." So I was like, I didn't really want to, but I did. And it turned out that I had a hematoma. So there was some internal bleeding. So I went to urgent care and they sent me right back to the hospital, and I was sent to a different hospital, and I was there for like maybe another 2.5 weeks. By the time they gave me the diagnosis, I was so convinced something was wrong, and I kind of had like this inner instinct that it was cancer. I wasn't surprised, but I think I was also in shock. I was in pain for 3 years. I was, being told by the doctors that it was stress, that I was constipated, which I thought was strange because I know constipation is like it gets hard and you can't move it, but I was like having diarrhea and I was, I was having trouble having bowel movements, but they were soft. It was, because everything was pushed up. I had several scans, and what I've learned about scans is that they can't necessarily see everything with a scan or even know what it is they're seeing when they see the scan. One thing that was consistent in all my scans was they kept on saying they saw a necrotic fibroid in my uterus, and I'm kind of upset at myself that I didn't say something because I had had a ablation. So it didn't make sense to me that I had a fibroid at all because there was not really any blood flow going into my uterus. My oncologist said to me was like, don't go on the internet, don't look at the survival rates. And it's like, I had already looked. So his warning was a little too late, but and he said cherish every moment, and I love my oncologist for trying to be encouraging, but he said that to me several times over over the past couple of years, over the past year and a half or so, and I just feel like he's telling me you're gonna die, but I understand he was trying to be encouraging, but everybody's different. But so they told me that next they would put in the port, and then they would start chemotherapy. They didn't want to start everything right away. Of course, they wanted to give me time to recover from the surgery fully. And then they did schedule them putting in the port, but then they rescheduled it and pushed it out because they said we have to remove the drain first from the hematoma and allow you to heal fully from that. So I got my port put in like May 31st of 2023, and I had my first chemo on June 1st. So the very next day I had my first chemo for the leiomyosarcoma. I had like 2 weeks on, 1 week off. I did that for through June and July. Then they had to stop like in August because I had to go to urgent care. I was having difficulty breathing. So it turned out that I had like fluid around my lungs and I had a blood clot in my lungs. So a pulmonary emboli or something like that. So they put me on blood thinners, and I took like a few weeks break from chemo to kind of recover from that. Then they restarted chemo again from at the end of August through November. And then I had more side effects. I was having trouble breathing again. I also had really bad pain in my arms and legs. I actually had to start using a walker while I was on chemo because the pain in my legs and arms was so severe I could barely get around. And then the difficulty breathing, I would have to be able to stop. It was a rollator so that I could walk a few steps, stop, sit down, catch my breath, get back up, walk again. And I was having that difficulty breathing. It got to the point where I thought I was going to suffocate to death. And it was so much fluid around my lungs, like literally, I almost what they call dry drowned. I was sitting up to sleep at night. That's how bad it was because I could not breathe. But I told the doctor, my oncologist, I said, look, I need a break from chemo. I need a break from all of this. And so he did stop chemo, but thankfully, also the scans around that time showed that the cancer wasn't growing. So it's still there, but it's just stable. It's not growing. And the doctor already told me that to anticipate like long term care, that they said they are not going to be able to get rid of it, but they'll do chemo to, I guess, kind of maintain it and keep it under control for as long as they can. I kind of need to look at my story and put it out there and release it, because it has been a huge experience. I don't want to say traumatic, but to a certain extent, a traumatic experience, going through the doctors not really taking me seriously, even leading up to that, the diagnosis and everything that has happened since, you know, um, I want to just release it is one part of it. But another part of it is I want to share with people out there that are listening to don't stop. Don't start pursuing when you're having pain, when something doesn't feel right. You know your body. You know when something is wrong, because that's what I had to do. My family members were saying, hey, maybe you're just stressed. Stress can cause pain. And, everybody around me was kind of downing me. I had to stand strong in knowing that I know my body and I know when something is wrong, and continue pursuing it, even when the doctors were saying I was, crazy too. Advocate for yourself. Just because a doctor says something doesn't mean it's true. And just keep pushing. Keep knowing that you do know your body. You do know when something is off, and say things right away. One thing I regret is that I didn't. When doctors were telling me things, there was things I wanted to say to them, and I wanted to push back a lot of times, and I didn't. And I kind of regret that, because things dragged on a lot longer maybe than they would have had I pushed back a little harder. Maybe not, but I wish I had at least tried.